The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the familiar sound of 1,000 different species communicating through translators, breathing apparatus, and electromagnetic fields. Ambassador Sarah Chun sat perfectly still in her assigned seat, her hands folded neatly in her lap as she listened to yet another round of insults disguised as diplomatic discourse. The humans, declared Ambassador Zethrak of the Vorthak Empire, his four arms gesticulating wildly as his translator converted his chittering into standard galactic, are perhaps the most disappointing species we have encountered in 3,000 years of expansion. Weak bones that break under minimal pressure, organs that fail after mere decades, and, worst of all, they insist on bringing their primitive chemical-based weapons to a civilized galaxy. Laughter rippled through the chamber. The crystalline hierarchy's representative chimed like wind bells, while the gas-based Nebular Collective's ambassador pulsed with colors that the translation system interpreted as amusement. Even the normally stoic Metallic Brotherhood allowed their optical sensors to flicker in what passed for their version of mirth. Sarah had heard variations of this speech for the past 6 months since humanity had been granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council. Every session began the same way. Some alien species would stand up, point out humanity's obvious biological weaknesses, mock their technology, and question why such a pathetic race had been allowed into galactic society at all. The truth was, humanity had only been admitted because they controlled a small cluster of systems that contained rare minerals essential for faster-than-light communication. The galaxy needed those minerals, and humanity happened to live on top of them. It was that simple. Furthermore, Zethrak continued, now warming to his favorite topic, their so-called military is laughably primitive. Chemical rockets? Kinetic weapons? Metal projectiles fired by controlled explosions? We left such crude technology behind when we were still learning to manipulate gravity itself. More laughter. Sarah noticed that even some of the species that had previously remained neutral were now joining in the amusement. The tide of opinion in the galaxy had been turning against humanity for months, ever since the Hegemony Wars had begun. The Hegemony Wars were exactly what they sounded like, a massive conflict between the major galactic powers over who would control the next phase of galactic expansion. 3 major factions had emerged. The Dominion Alliance, led by species like the Vorthak who believed in strength through military might. The Cooperative League, which favored economic and cultural expansion, and the Synthesis Collective, which sought to merge organic and artificial intelligence into a single governing entity. Humanity, as the newest and weakest member of the Council, had been courted by all 3 factions. But the humans had made what many considered a catastrophic mistake. They had refused to choose sides. Instead, they had declared neutrality and requested that their small cluster of systems be designated as a neutral zone. Neutrality, spat Ambassador Vex of the Synthesis Collective, her cybernetic implants glowing as she spoke, is what the weak choose when they lack the courage to stand for something. Humans speak of principles and ethics, but what they really fear is picking the losing side. Sarah finally stood up, her movement causing a hush to fall over the chamber. At barely 5.5 feet tall, she was dwarfed by most of the other ambassadors. The Vorthak towered at nearly 9 feet. The crystalline delegates grew to impressive heights, and even the artificial bodies used by the gas-based species were imposing. But Sarah had learned that sometimes the smallest voice could carry the farthest. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice calm and steady. "I appreciate the Council's continued interest in humanity's development. However, I must remind you that our neutrality is not born from fear, but from principle. We believe that this conflict could be resolved through dialogue rather than warfare." The laughter that erupted was louder than before. Several ambassadors didn't even bother to use their translators, letting their natural sounds of amusement fill the chamber. Dialogue, wheezed Ambassador Croton of the Dominion Alliance, his respiratory system working overtime to produce what passed for mirth among his species, from a race that spent most of its recorded history killing each other over resources, territory, and ideology. How refreshing to see that humans have discovered pacifism just in time to avoid contributing to a real war. Sarah felt her jaw clench slightly, but her expression remained neutral. We prefer to think of it as having learned from our mistakes. Your mistakes, said Zethrak, will be irrelevant when one of the three factions emerges victorious. Your neutrality will not protect you then. The winner will remember who stood with them and who did not. Humans will find themselves with no friends and no protection in a galaxy that values strength above all else. Then perhaps, Sarah said quietly, the galaxy needs to reconsider what strength really means. The chamber fell silent for a moment before erupting in the loudest laughter yet. Even the normally dignified Elder Council members seemed amused by what they clearly saw as typical human naivety. Ambassador Zethrak's mandibles clicked together in what Sarah had learned was the Vorthack equivalent of a smile. Enlighten us, Ambassador Chun. What does strength mean to humans? Sarah looked around the chamber, meeting the optical sensors, compound eyes, and various other sensory organs of nearly 1,000 different species. Strength is knowing when not to use power. Strength is choosing the difficult path of peace when violence would be easier. Strength is standing by your principles, even when everyone else tells you you're wrong. How poetic, said Ambassador Vex, her artificial voice dripping with sarcasm. I wonder if humans will still speak of principles when the hegemon fleets arrive at their borders. The hegemon fleets, Sarah replied, would be wise to remember that Earth has survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, global wars, and environmental collapse. We're still here. That should tell you something about human resilience. Zethrak's laughter was a harsh, chittering sound. Your planet survived natural disasters and primitive conflicts between your own species. That hardly compares to facing the combined might of advanced galactic civilizations. Your chemical weapons and metal projectiles will not save you from energy weapons that can crack planets or temporal disruptors that can age your ships into dust in seconds. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. You may be right. Our technology is certainly more primitive than yours. Our weapons are crude by your standards. Our ships are slow and inefficient compared to your marvel of engineering. The chamber had grown quiet again, waiting for her to continue. But there's something you should understand about humans, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. We don't fight fair. The silence stretched for several seconds before Ambassador Croton spoke up. What exactly do you mean by that, Ambassador? Sarah smiled, and for the first time since she had arrived at the Galactic Council, it was a genuinely warm expression. I mean that when humans are threatened, we don't limit ourselves to conventional thinking. We don't fight the way our enemies expect us to fight. We adapt. We improvise. We find weaknesses that others overlook. And, most importantly, we never, ever give up. Inspiring words, said Zethrak dismissively. But words will not stop plasma cannons or gravitational weapons. Your human spirit will not protect you from forces that can reshape matter at the quantum level. Sarah's smile widened. Maybe not, but our human spirit has gotten us this far, and I suspect it will surprise you before this war is over. The council session ended shortly after that, with the usual bureaucratic discussions about trade routes and resource allocations. But as the various ambassadors filed out of the chamber, Sarah noticed something different in the air. The mockery was still there, but underneath it was something else, a tiny seed of uncertainty. 3 weeks later, that uncertainty began to grow. The first sign that something had changed came from the Outer Rim monitoring stations. The Vorthack Empire, as the most militarily aggressive member of the Dominion Alliance, had decided to test human resolve by sending a small battle group to the edge of human space. It wasn't technically an invasion. The ships remained just outside the neutral zone, but the message was clear. Choose a side or be chosen for. The battle group consisted of 12 ships, which in galactic terms was barely a patrol fleet. But each Vorthack destroyer was nearly a kilometer long and armed with weapons that could reduce a planet's surface to molten slag in a matter of hours. The flagship, a heavy cruiser called the Bone Crusher, was over 2 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to level a small moon. Admiral Marcus Webb, commanding the human defense fleet from the bridge of the UES Defiance, studied the sensor readings with interest rather than alarm. The Defiance was humanity's largest warship, but at only 800 meters long, it was dwarfed by even the smallest Vorthack destroyer. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez from the sensor station, "the Vorthack fleet is maintaining position at the edge of the neutral zone. They've been there for 6 hours now, just sitting there." "What do you think they're waiting for?" asked Commander Sarah Mitchell, Webb's second-in-command. Admiral Webb was a tall, lean man in his early 60s, with gray hair and calm blue eyes that had seen more than their share of conflict. He had served in Earth's final global war 30 years earlier, and later in the colonial expansion conflict that had marked humanity's early attempts at interstellar settlement. "They're waiting for us to panic," Webb said quietly. "Standard intimidation tactics. Show overwhelming force. Let the enemy's imagination do the rest." "Orders, sir." Webb looked at the tactical display, showing the disposition of both fleets. The humans had managed to cobble together a defense force of 8 ships, 4 destroyers, 2 cruisers, and 2 support vessels. On paper, it wasn't even close to a fair fight. "Maintain current patrol patterns," Webb ordered. "Business as usual." "Sir," Commander Mitchell looked confused. "They're obviously here to provoke a response. Shouldn't we at least move to a defensive posture?" Webb smiled, the same kind of smile that Ambassador Chun had worn in the council chamber. "Sarah, how long have you known me?" 15 years, sir. Since the academy. And in all that time, have you ever known me to do what the enemy expects?" Mitchell thought about it for a moment, then shook her head. "No, sir, I haven't." "Then, trust me now. The Vorthack are expecting us to either run away in fear or make some kind of aggressive posture. We're going to disappoint them by doing neither." For the next 18 hours, the 2 fleets simply stared at each other across the invisible line that marked the boundary of human space. The Vorthack maintained their position, occasionally running what appeared to be weapons drills or sensor sweeps. The human fleet continued their normal patrol routes, seemingly oblivious to the threat sitting on their doorstep. But appearances can be deceiving. Deep in the bowels of the Defiance, in a section of the ship that didn't appear on any official schematic, a team of engineers and technicians worked feverishly on equipment that would have been impossible to explain to the Galactic Council. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it represented everything that made humans dangerous to underestimate. "How much longer?" asked Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the project's chief scientist. Chief Engineer Thompson wiped sweat from his forehead and checked his readings one more time. "Another 4 hours, maybe 5. The power couplings are holding, but barely. This thing was designed for laboratory conditions, not shipboard use." Dr. Harper nodded grimly. What they were attempting had never been tested under actual combat conditions. The theory was sound, and the small-scale experiments had been promising, but scaling it up to this level was purely theoretical. "Do we have enough exotic matter?" she asked. "Barely. If this doesn't work, we'll need another 6 months to manufacture more. Then, we'd better make sure it works." On the bridge, Admiral Webb received a coded message from Dr. Harper. The message was simple. "Tea is ready to be served." Webb nodded to himself and opened a channel to the Vorthack fleet. It was time to see if human ingenuity could overcome alien technology. "Vorthack Vessel Bone Crusher, this is Admiral Webb of the United Earthship Defiance. You have been observing our space for 21 hours. I'm curious about your intentions." The response came quickly, transmitted in perfect standard galactic with a slight electronic distortion that indicated the use of a universal translator. "Admiral Webb, I am Fleet Commander Thrakis of the Vorthack Empire. We are conducting routine patrol exercises near the boundary of your space. Surely you do not object to ships operating in unclaimed territory." "Not at all," Webb replied pleasantly. "Though I notice your exercises seem to involve a lot of sitting still and pointing weapons in our direction. Perhaps you'd like to come closer and show us these exercises in more detail." There was a pause before Thrakis responded, and when he did, there was clear amusement in his translated voice. Admiral Webb, are you seriously inviting a Vorthack battle group to enter your territory? I would hate for there to be any misunderstanding about our intentions. No misunderstanding at all. You're here to gauge human resolve. I'm here to show it to you. Consider this a formal invitation to cross the boundary and see what humans do when threatened. The silence stretched for nearly a full minute. Then Thraki spoke again, and this time the amusement was replaced by something else. Anticipation. How refreshing to meet a human with courage, even if it is the courage of foolishness. Very well, Admiral Webb. We accept your invitation. The Vorthack fleet began moving forward, crossing into human space with weapons powered, but not yet locked onto targets. It was still technically not an act of war, but it was the closest thing to one without actually firing shots. All ships, Webb broadcast on the human fleet frequency, maintain current positions. Weapons remain offline. Repeat, weapons remain offline. Commander Mitchell stared at him in disbelief. Sir, they're crossing the line. Shouldn't we at least raise shields? Sarah, Webb said calmly. Have you ever seen a magician perform? Sir, the whole trick is misdirection. While the audience is watching the magician's right hand, the real magic is happening with the left hand. I don't understand. Webb smiled again, but this time there was something almost predatory in the expression. The Vorthack are watching our weapons, our shields, our defensive preparations. They're expecting us to fight like they fight big ships, powerful weapons, overwhelming force. He paused to check the countdown timer on his personal display. 3 minutes and 47 seconds. But humans learned long ago that the best weapon is often the one your enemy doesn't see coming. The Vorthack fleet had crossed fully into human space now, moving with the confident swagger of a superior force that knew it couldn't be challenged. Their ships were magnificent examples of military engineering, sleek, deadly, and bristling with enough firepower to reduce a small planet to ash. Admiral, reported Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, the Vorthack are moving into attack formation. I'm reading massive energy spikes from their weapon systems. How long until they're in optimal firing position? 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Webb nodded and opened a private channel to Dr. Harper. Elizabeth, please tell me your tea is ready. Ready and waiting, Admiral. Just say the word. Webb looked around the bridge at his crew. They were scared. He could see it in their faces, but they trusted him. They believed that he had a plan that would somehow get them out of this impossible situation. The truth was, he did have a plan. But if it failed, they would all be dead in the next 10 minutes. Fleet Commander Thrakis, Webb broadcast, I have to say, your ships are impressive. Truly magnificent examples of advanced military technology. Thank you, Admiral Webb. I hope you appreciate them while you can. Oh, Edo. But I have to ask, have you ever heard the human saying about bringing a knife to a gunfight? I'm not familiar with that expression. Webb's smile became genuinely warm. It means that sometimes the weapon you think is superior isn't actually the right tool for the job. 1 minute and 15 seconds. Admiral Webb, are you attempting to engage in psychological warfare? Because I assure you, Vorthack minds are not susceptible to such crude tactics. Not psychological warfare, Fleet Commander. Just a friendly observation about the nature of technological advancement. 30 seconds. Webb took a deep breath and spoke the words that would either save his fleet or doom them all. Dr. Harper, please serve the tea. What happened next will be talked about in hushed tones throughout the galaxy for generations to come. One moment, 12 Vorthack warships were bearing down on a tiny human fleet, their weapons charging for what should have been a devastating first strike. The next moment, 11 of those ships simply ceased to exist. They didn't explode. They didn't break apart. They didn't burn or collapse or suffer any kind of visible damage. They were there, and then they were not there, leaving behind only expanding clouds of elementary particles that had once been exotic matter, metals, and organic components. The only ship that survived was the flagship Bone Crusher, and only because Admiral Webb had specifically ordered Dr. Harper to leave one ship intact. Fleet Commander Thrakis' voice came over the communication channel, and for the first time since first contact, A Vorthack sounded genuinely frightened. What did you do? What kind of weapon was that? Admiral Webb leaned back in his command chair and spoke in the same calm, pleasant tone he had used throughout the encounter. That Fleet Commander Thrakis was a demonstration of human ingenuity. You see, while your species has spent thousands of years perfecting energy weapons and gravitational manipulators, humans have been working on something different. Something your sensors can't detect because it doesn't technically exist until the moment we activate it. That's impossible. No weapon can destroy matter so completely without leaving any trace. You're absolutely right, Webb agreed. But what if I told you we didn't destroy your ships at all? What if I told you we simply convinced the universe that they had never existed in the first place? The silence on the communication channel lasted for nearly 30 seconds. You're lying, Thrakis finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. Fleet Commander, I'm going to give you a gift. I'm going to let you return to Vorthack space and report what you've seen here. I want you to tell your superiors exactly what happened to your fleet. And then I want you to ask yourself this question. If humans can make 11 ships disappear without a trace, what else might we be capable of? Webb paused to let that sink in before continuing. You called us weak because our bones break easily and our weapons are primitive. You mocked our neutrality as cowardice. But here's what you failed to understand about humans. We've spent our entire existence as the physically weakest species on a planet full of predators. We survived not because we were strong, but because we were clever, because we could think our way around problems that should have killed us. The Defiance's sensors showed the Bone Crusher's engines coming online, preparing to retreat. Fleet Commander Thrakis, Webb said gently, when you make your report, please be sure to mention that humanity still prefers peace to war. But also mention that we will not be intimidated, threatened, or forced to choose sides in someone else's conflict. And if anyone decides to test us again, they should remember that we only used the smallest setting. The Bone Crusher jumped to faster-than-light travel without another word, leaving behind only the expanding particle clouds that had once been 11 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Commander Mitchell stared at the display in shock. Admiral, what the hell was that? Webb stood up and stretched, suddenly feeling every one of his 62 years. That, Sarah, was humanity's first public demonstration of quantum existence manipulation, or, as Dr. Harper likes to call it, the reality adjustment drive. Reality adjustment? The theory is actually quite simple. Webb explained as they watched the last traces of the Vorthack ships disperse into space. Everything in the universe exists because the quantum field maintains certain probability states. Change the probability that something exists from certain to impossible, and the universe corrects itself accordingly. You mean you just convinced reality that those ships were never there? More or less. Though it takes enormous amounts of exotic matter and computational power to pull off. That's why we could only affect 11 ships. We didn't have enough juice for all 12. Mitchell sat down heavily in her chair. Sir, do you realize what this means? If we can make ships disappear, we could end this war before it really begins. Webb's expression grew serious. We could, but remember what I told the Galactic Council about strength being knowing when not to use power? This weapon is so devastating that using it widely would make us the very thing we're trying to avoid becoming, a galactic hegemon that rules through fear. So what do? We hope that word of what happened here spreads quickly enough to make the other factions reconsider their aggressive expansion plans. Sometimes the most effective weapon is the one you never have to use again. But, as Admiral Webb would soon discover, the galaxy was about to become a much more complicated place. News of the Vorthack fleet's destruction would indeed spread quickly throughout known space. Unfortunately, instead of discouraging further aggression, it would have the opposite effect. Every major power in the galaxy would suddenly realize that the small, weak, primitive human race had just become the most dangerous faction in galactic history. And they would all want to either control that power or destroy it before it could be used against them. The real war was about to begin. Part 2. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called exactly 72 hours after the Bone Crusher limped back to Vorthack space with its impossible story. Ambassador Sarah Chan watched from her assigned seat as representatives from nearly every major species in the galaxy filed into the chamber with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed terror. The normal order of business had been suspended. There were no trade disputes to discuss, no territorial claims to negotiate, no routine diplomatic protocols to observe. There was only one item on the agenda. What the hell had happened to the Vorthack battle group? Fleet Commander Thrakis stood at the center of the chamber, his four arms held rigidly at his sides as he delivered his report for the third time. His voice, filtered through the universal translator, carried none of the confidence and swagger that had characterized Vorthack communications for the past 1,000 years. The human vessels showed no unusual energy signatures. Thrakis repeated mechanically. No gravitacional disturbances, no temporal fluctuações, no exotique partícula emissions. One moment my fleet existed, the next moment 11 ships simply weren't. Ambassador Vex of the Synthesis Collective leaned forward, her cybernetic implants pulsing as she processed data streams. Commander Thrakis, you're asking us to believe that primitive humans have developed a weapon that can annihilate matter without leaving any trace of energy release. Such a weapon would violate several fundamental laws of physics. I'm not asking you to believe anything, Thrakis replied stiffly. I'm reporting what I observed. Believe what you wish. Sarah noticed that the Vorthack commander's mandibles were trembling slightly. She had learned enough about Vorthack physiology to recognize the signs of stress. Whatever Thrakis had witnessed had shaken him to his core. Ambassador Croton of the Dominion Alliance spoke up from his position near the front of the chamber. Perhaps, he wheezed, the good commander is simply embarrassed by a tactical failure and has concocted this story to save face. It would not be the first time a military leader has blamed mysterious weapons for their own incompetence. The chamber erupted as every Vorthack delegate rose to their feet in unison, their chittering voices creating a cacophony of outrage. It took several minutes for the Council's moderating systems to restore order. I've served the Vorthack Empire for 40 years, Thrakis said once the noise died down. I have commanded fleets in 16 major engagements and countless minor skirmishes. I have never lost a battle, and I have certainly never lost 11 ships without firing a single shot in response. If you think I would fabricate such a humiliating story to protect my reputation, you understand nothing about Vorthack honor. Sarah had remained silent throughout the entire session, but now she felt all eyes in the chamber turning toward her. It was time to speak, though she knew that whatever she said would fundamentally alter humanity's relationship with the rest of the galaxy. She stood slowly, her human height making her appear almost childlike among the towering alien delegates. When she spoke, her voice was calm and clear. Honored delegates, I can confirm that Fleet Commander Thrakis has reported the events accurately. A human defense fleet did engage 12 Vorthack vessels that had entered our territory without authorization. 11 of those ships were neutralized using non-conventional means. The chamber fell silent. Even the usual background hum of life support systems and translation equipment seemed muted. Ambassador Zethrak, Thrakis' immediate superior in the Vorthack hierarchy, was the first to find his voice. Non-conventional means? What exactly does that mean, Ambassador Chen? Sarah had spent the past 3 days in consultation with Earth's leadership, discussing exactly how much information to reveal. The decision had been unanimous. Full disclosure was humanity's best option for preventing a larger conflict. It means, she said clearly, that humanity has developed technology that can manipulate quantum probability fields to alter the existential state of targeted objects. The silence stretched for nearly a full minute before Ambassador Vex spoke up. That's impossible. Quantum probability manipulation on a macro scale would require computational power that exceeds the total processing capacity of our most advanced civilizations. You're probably right, Sarah agreed, which is why it took us nearly 50 years to develop the necessary algorithms and another 20 to build the hardware capable of implementing them. She paused to let that sink in before continuing. What you call impossible, we call difficult. There's a difference. Elder Counselor Nethes, the ancient representative of the Eternal Archives, spoke for the first time in the session. His voice was like rustling leaves, barely audible even through the translation system. "Child of Earth," he whispered, "do you understand what you have revealed? Your species has developed the power to rewrite reality itself. Such power has not been seen in this galaxy for over 10 million years." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The Eternal Archives were the oldest known civilization in the galaxy, and Elder Nethes was rumored to be over 1 million years old himself. If he was referencing events from 10 million years ago, it meant he was talking about the precursors, the mysterious race that had vanished long before any of the current galactic civilizations had achieved spaceflight. "Elder Nethes," Sarah said respectfully, "humanity has no desire to become a dominant power in the galaxy. We developed this technology purely for defensive purposes. The ancient beings' optical sensors dimmed to almost nothing. That is what the precursors said as well. They, too, claimed to want only peace and security for themselves and their neighbors. What happened to them? They discovered that absolute power corrupts absolutely, regardless of the species that wields it. In the end, they destroyed themselves rather than become the tyrants they had sworn never to become." The chamber had grown so quiet that Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. She was beginning to understand why Earth's political leadership had been so divided about revealing the existence of the quantum manipulation technology. Some had argued for complete secrecy, others for limited disclosure, and still others for full transparency. In the end, they had chosen transparency, but Sarah was starting to wonder if that had been the right decision. Ambassador Croton broke the silence with a harsh laugh. "Fascinating historical parallels aside, we still have a practical problem to address. The humans have demonstrated a weapon of unprecedented power, and they refuse to align themselves with any of the existing factions. This makes them either a valuable ally or a dangerous enemy to everyone in this chamber. Which is exactly why," said a new voice from the gallery, "we propose a different solution entirely." Sarah turned to see who had spoken and felt her blood turn to ice. The speaker was Ambassador Zirian of the Hegemony Collective, a faction that hadn't been seen in the Galactic Core for over 2 years. The Hegemony had been one of the first casualties of the current conflict, supposedly destroyed in the opening battles of the war. But here was their representative, standing calmly in the observer's gallery, as if nothing had happened. Elder Nethes's optical sensors flared to full brightness. "Impossible. The Hegemony worlds were scoured clean. We detected the destruction signatures ourselves." Zirian smiled, an expression that looked disturbingly human on his otherwise alien features. "The Hegemony Collective is very difficult to kill, honored Elder. We simply adapted." As he spoke, Zirian began to walk down toward the main floor of the chamber. But with each step, his appearance changed. His skin shifted from the pale blue typical of his species to a mottled gray-green. His body structure altered, becoming taller and more angular. By the time he reached the central speaking platform, he looked nothing like the being who had started walking. "Shapeshifters," breathed Ambassador Vex, her mechanical components whirring as they processed this new information. "The Hegemony survived by becoming shapeshifters." "Not shapeshifters," Zirian corrected, his voice now carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. "Adapters. We learned to become whatever the situation required us to become. When our worlds were attacked, we became refugees. When refugees were hunted, we became other species. When other species proved inadequate, we became something new entirely." Sarah felt pieces clicking together in her mind. "How long have you been infiltrating the other factions?" "Since the beginning of the war. We have representatives in every major government, every military organization, every research facility, and every decision-making body in the galaxy, including, of course, the Human Defense Forces." The blood drained from Sarah's face. "That's impossible. We have genetic screening, biometric monitoring, quantum identification protocols, all of which we learned to circumvent from the very humans who developed them. Zirian's form continued to shift, now taking on characteristics that looked almost familiar. Did you think you were the only species capable of innovation, Ambassador Chun? Admiral Webb's voice crackled through the emergency communication system that connected the council chamber to the human fleet. Ambassador Chun, we have a situation. I'm reading massive energy signatures throughout the system. Ships are decloaking everywhere. Sarah's personal communicator lit up with incoming messages from every human outpost in their home system. The reports were all the same. Ships appearing from nowhere, ships that had somehow bypassed every sensor, every detection grid, every early warning system that humanity had deployed. How many? Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. Best estimate? About 10,000 ships, ranging from fighter craft to dreadnoughts larger than anything in our databases. They're not attacking, just watching. Zirian, who now looked disturbingly like a hybrid of several different species, nodded approvingly. The hegemony has been preparing for this moment since the war began. We allowed the other factions to weaken themselves, fighting each other while we gathered intelligence and resources. And now, with the revelation of human quantum manipulation technology, the time has come to end this conflict once and for all. Elder Nethys rose from his ancient chair, moving with surprising speed for someone of his age. You cannot repeat the mistakes of the past. The power to manipulate reality itself must not be allowed to fall into the hands of any single faction. I agree completely, Zirian said smoothly, which is why the hegemony proposes a different approach entirely. We don't want to control human technology, we want to integrate it. We want to create a new kind of galactic civilization, one where every species contributes their unique abilities to a collective whole. Forced integration, Ambassador Vex spat. The same goal the Synthesis Collective has been working toward, but through conquest rather than cooperation. Not conquest, Zirian corrected. Evolution. The galaxy is too diverse, too chaotic, too prone to conflict to continue as it has. The hegemony wars have proven that. 3 years of fighting, billions of casualties, entire star systems laid waste, and for what? To determine which faction gets to impose their will on the others. He gestured towards Sarah. But now we have an opportunity to transcend these limitations. Human quantum manipulation technology, combined with hegemony adaptive capabilities, could create something unprecedented, a true galactic consciousness that incorporates the best aspects of every species. Sarah felt a chill of understanding. You're talking about forced assimilation. You want to turn every species in the galaxy into versions of yourselves. I'm talking about voluntary evolution towards something greater than any of US could achieve alone. The hegemony offers partnership, not domination. And if we refuse, Zirian's hybrid features arrange themselves into an expression of genuine regret. Then, the galaxy will continue its current path towards self-destruction, and we will be forced to intervene more directly. 10,000 ships is merely our advance force, Ambassador Chun. The full hegemony fleet numbers in the hundreds of thousands. The communication system crackled again with Admiral Webb's voice. Ambassador, I'm receiving surrender demands from the hegemony fleet. They want all human quantum manipulation technology transferred to their ships immediately, along with the personnel who developed it. Sarah looked around the chamber and realized that every delegate was staring at her, waiting for her response. The weight of her species' survival rested on whatever she said next. Admiral Webb, she said clearly, please relay the following message to the hegemony fleet commander. Humanity appreciates their offer of partnership, but we must respectfully decline. Our quantum manipulation technology is not for sale, lease, or transfer under any circumstances. Zirian's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted subtly. Ambassador Chun, I hope you understand the implications of that decision. The hegemony has devoted considerable resources to reaching this point. We cannot simply accept a refusal and withdraw. Then, I guess we have a problem, Sarah replied. She activated her personal communicator and spoke 4 words that would echo throughout the galaxy for generations to come. Admiral Webb, condition zebra. The reaction in the chamber was immediate. Every species that maintained intelligence networks knew what condition zebra meant in human military terminology. It was the code for total war, no quarter given or expected, fight to the last ship and the last person. Ambassador Vex's cybernetic implants flared as she processed tactical data streams. Ambassador Chun, you're talking about a conflict between 10,000 ships and your entire defense fleet of, what? 12 vessels? 18, actually, we've been building. Zirian's hybrid features arranged themselves into what might have been amusement. 18 ships against 10,000. And you consider this an acceptable battle ratio? Sarah smiled, and it was the same smile that Admiral Webb had worn when facing down the Vorthack fleet. Ambassador Zirian, you seem to be under the impression that numbers matter more than capability. That's a very non-human way of thinking. She paused to activate another communication channel, this one broadcasting on every frequency used by every species in the galaxy. When she spoke again, her words would be heard in the Dominion Alliance, the Cooperative League, the Synthesis Collective, and every independent system from the Galactic Core to the Outer Rim. This is Ambassador Sarah Chun, speaking for the United Earth Government. As of this moment, humanity is formally withdrawing from the Galactic Council and declaring our intention to defend ourselves against any and all aggressors. We renounce any claim to galactic citizenship or protection under galactic law. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates from every species began shouting questions and protests. But Sarah wasn't finished. However, she continued, her voice cutting through the noise. We also extend an offer to any species that wishes to join us in resisting forced assimilation. Human space will serve as a sanctuary for any beings who value their independence more than their safety. Zirian's adaptive features shifted into a configuration that could only be described as predatory. A noble gesture, Ambassador Chun. But sanctuary requires the ability to provide protection. What makes you think your 18 ships can stand against the combined might of the hegemony? Sarah's smile widened. Because you're still thinking in terms of conventional warfare. Ships against ships, weapons against weapons, technology against technology. But humans learned long ago that the most effective way to win a war is to make sure the enemy can't fight it in the first place. She gestured toward the massive display screen that dominated one wall of the chamber. Admiral Webb, please show our guests what condition zebra actually means. The display came to life, showing the human home system from multiple angles. The hegemony fleet was clearly visible. Thousands of ships in perfect formation, their weapons powered and ready. But something was wrong with the image. The ships seemed to be flickering. What you're seeing, Sarah explained calmly, is the result of 50 years of human research into quantum probability manipulation. We don't just use it as a weapon. We've learned to apply it defensively as well. The flickering became more pronounced. Ships would appear solid for a few seconds, then become translucent, then solid again. We've convinced the universe that there's only a 70% probability that your fleet actually exists, Sarah continued, which means that only 70% of your ships are capable of functioning at any given moment. And that percentage is dropping by 1 point every 30 seconds. The chamber had fallen silent again. Even the background noise of life support systems seemed muted. You're bluffing, Zirian said, but his voice lacked conviction. No civilization has ever achieved that level of quantum manipulation. You're probably right, Sarah agreed. Good thing humans are too stubborn to let that stop us. Admiral Webb's voice came through the communication system again. Ambassador, the hegemony fleet is attempting to withdraw, but their faster-than-light drives are experiencing significant malfunctions. It seems the universe isn't quite sure they exist well enough to travel through hyperspace. Sarah nodded. How long until probability reaches zero? At current rate of decay? Approximately 17 minutes. She turned back to Zirian, whose adaptive features were now cycling through configurations so rapidly that it was difficult to focus on them. You have 17 minutes to order your fleet to withdraw beyond the edge of human space. If they're not gone by then, they'll cease to exist entirely. This is madness, Zirian breathed. You're talking about committing genocide against thousands of beings. No, Sarah corrected. I'm talking about self-defense against an invading force. Your people came here with surrender demands and threats of forced assimilation. What did you think was going to happen? Elder Nethes spoke up from his ancient chair. Child of Earth, do you understand what you have begun? If the galaxy believes that humans can simply erase fleets from existence at will, every species will either bow to you in fear or unite against you in desperation. Sarah looked at the ancient being and nodded slowly. I know. That's why we're withdrawing from galactic society entirely. Humanity has no desire to rule over other species, but we will not be ruled either. We choose isolation over domination. Isolation is impossible in a connected galaxy, Ambassador Vex pointed out. Trade routes, communication networks, resource dependencies. No species can survive completely alone. Then, I guess we'll have to learn how, Sarah replied. Humans are good at adapting to impossible situations. Zirian's form had stabilized into something that looked more classically humanoid, though with features that seemed to shift whenever Sarah wasn't looking directly at them. Ambassador Chun, the hegemony is prepared to offer a compromise. We will withdraw our fleet and abandon any claims to human technology in exchange for a non-aggression pact. Humanity agrees not to use quantum manipulation technology against hegemony forces, and we agree not to attempt forced integration of human worlds. Sarah considered the offer for a long moment. It was reasonable, and it would probably save lives on both sides. But she had learned something important about galactic politics during her time as ambassador. Reasonable compromises had a tendency to become unreasonable demands once the immediate crisis passed. Counteroffer, she said finally. The hegemony withdraws all forces from human space immediately and abandons any plans for expansion into the territories of species that choose to remain independent. In exchange, humanity will not actively hunt down your fleets throughout the galaxy. That's hardly equivalent. You're asking us to abandon our long-term strategic goals in exchange for you not committing mass murder. Sarah's expression hardened. I'm asking you to abandon your plans for forced assimilation in exchange for continued existence. The choice is yours, but you have 14 minutes to make it. The negotiation continued for another 10 minutes, with representatives from other factions occasionally offering their own suggestions or demands. But in the end, it came down to a simple choice. The hegemony could withdraw and accept a significantly reduced sphere of influence, or they could test whether human quantum manipulation technology was really as effective as it appeared to be. With 3 minutes remaining on Sarah's countdown, Zirian finally nodded. The hegemony accepts your terms. Our fleets will withdraw immediately. All of them, including the infiltrators and sleeper agents you've placed throughout the galaxy. Zirian's features shifted into what might have been surprise. How did you? Because that's what humans would do in your situation. We've been watching and learning just like you have. The difference is we've been watching you watch us. She activated her communicator again. Admiral Webb, please restore normal probability to the hegemony fleet and allow them to withdraw. On the display screen, the flickering ships solidified into normal matter just as their faster-than-light drives came back online. Within minutes, the entire hegemony force had vanished into hyperspace, leaving human space as empty as it had been before their arrival. But as Sarah watched the last enemy ship disappear, she realized that humanity's real problems were just beginning. Word of what had happened here would spread throughout the galaxy within days. Every species, every faction, every independent world would have to decide how they wanted to relate to a race that could apparently erase fleets from existence with a thought. Some would seek alliance. Others would demand tribute. Still others would unite in the belief that humanity had become too dangerous to be allowed to exist. And Sarah was beginning to suspect that the quantum manipulation technology that had saved them today might ultimately be the thing that doomed them tomorrow. The galaxy was about to become a very lonely place for the human race. Part 36 months after humanity withdrew from the Galactic Council. Captain Lisa Park stood on the bridge of the U.S. horizon, watching the strangest sight she had encountered in 15 years of space exploration. Stretched across the void before her ship was a refugee fleet unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Over 300 vessels representing 47 different species, all fleeing the chaos that had engulfed civilized space since the hegemony wars resumed. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Zhang from the communication station, "we're receiving another group of asylum requests. This time it's from a crystalline merchant convoy. They're requesting permission to enter human space." Lisa nodded wearily. The requests had been coming in steadily for weeks now. Independent traders, refugee families, entire colony ships full of beings who had decided that the uncertain protection of human space was preferable to the expanding violence of the Galactic War. "Standard protocol," she ordered. "Full bioscans, quantum signature verification, and background checks. If they're clean, they get temporary sanctuary permits." The human government had established the sanctuary program almost immediately after withdrawing from galactic society. Any being or group that could prove they weren't agents of hostile powers could request temporary protection in human space. It had seemed like a humanitarian gesture at the time, but the program had quickly grown beyond anything Earth's leadership had anticipated. "Captain," called Commander Torres from the tactical station, "I'm detecting a massive energy signature approaching from the galactic core. Whatever it is, it's big." Lisa felt her stomach tighten. For the past 6 months, human space had been relatively peaceful despite the chaos elsewhere in the galaxy. The quantum manipulation technology had proven to be an excellent deterrent. No faction wanted to test whether humans could really make entire fleets disappear. But Lisa had always known that peace couldn't last forever. Classification: unknown. The energy signature doesn't match anything in our databases. It's not Vorthack, not hegemony, not any of the known military powers. Lisa was about to order a more detailed sensor sweep when her communications officer spoke up again. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission. It's on emergency frequencies, using standard galactic diplomatic protocols. Put it through." The main display screen flickered to life, revealing a face that Lisa recognized from intelligence briefings but had never expected to see in person. Elder Counselor Nethes of the Eternal Archives appeared on screen, his ancient features marked by what could only be described as desperation. "Captain Park," the Elder said without preamble, "I need to speak with your government immediately. The situation in the galaxy has become far worse than anyone anticipated." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. The Eternal Archives were neutral in all conflicts, had been for millions of years. If Elder Nethes was requesting human assistance, something had gone catastrophically wrong. "Elder Counselor," she said respectfully, "you're welcome in human space, but I'll need to know what kind of escort you're traveling with. My tactical officer is reading a very large energy signature." "That would be my ship," Nethes replied. "The Archive Eternal. We've had to abandon our homeworld." Lisa blinked in surprise. The Archive Eternal was a legend, a ship city that was rumored to be larger than most moons, containing the complete recorded history of galactic civilization. The idea that such a massive vessel could be forced to flee from anything was almost incomprehensible. What happened? The hegemony discovered that we possessed records of the precursor civilization, including technical specifications for some of their more advanced technologies. They demanded we turn over everything. When we refused, the Elder's image flickered as what appeared to be weapons fire illuminated the space around his ship. "When we refused," he continued, "they attempted to take the archives by force. We've been running for 3 weeks. Lisa made a quick decision. "Elder Counselor, you are granted immediate sanctuary in human space. We'll escort you to a secure location." "Captain," Commander Torres interrupted, "I'm reading multiple pursuit signatures behind the archive ship. Looks like a full hegemony battle fleet." "How many ships?" "At least 200, possibly more. They're still cloaked, but the quantum wake signatures are unmistakable." Lisa felt her heart rate spike. 200 hegemony ships was a significant force, more than enough to overwhelm the small human patrol fleet in this sector. But, more importantly, if the hegemony was willing to pursue the eternal archives into human space, it meant they had decided the potential gain was worth risking war with humanity. Lieutenant Zhang, give me Admiral Webb immediately. Priority Alpha, emergency codes. While her communications officer worked to establish contact with the human fleet command, Lisa studied the tactical display. The Archive Eternal was indeed massive, easily 20 kilometers long and nearly as wide, a mobile city ship that housed the greatest collection of knowledge in known space. The Hegemony pursuit fleet was closing rapidly, but they were still several hours away from crossing into human territory. Admiral Webb's face appeared on the communication screen within minutes, his expression grim. Captain Park, I've been monitoring your situation. How bad is it? Sir, Elder Counselor Nethes is requesting asylum, and he's being pursued by a major hegemony force. They want the precursor archives. Webb's expression grew even more serious. The precursors. I was afraid something like this might happen. Captain, you're authorized to use any means necessary to protect the archive ship. I'm dispatching additional forces to your location, but they won't arrive for at least 6 hours. Admiral, what's so important about precursor technology that the hegemony would risk war with us to get it? Webb paused, glancing at something off-screen before answering. Captain, that's classified information, but given the circumstances, the precursors didn't just develop quantum manipulation technology like we did. They perfected it. According to our intelligence estimates, they could manipulate reality on a galactic scale. Lisa felt the blood drain from her face. Human quantum manipulation could affect individual ships or small fleets. The idea of applying that technology on a galactic scale was terrifying. And the hegemony wants that power. The hegemony wants to become the precursor's successors. With that kind of technology, they could reshape the entire galaxy according to their will. Every species, every world, every individual being would exist only at their discretion. Before Lisa could respond, Lieutenant Zhang interrupted. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Hegemony Pursuit Fleet. Put it through. A new face appeared on the split screen. Commander Zirian, the same Hegemony representative who had confronted humanity at the Galactic Council 6 months earlier. His adaptive features had settled into a configuration that looked almost human, though with subtle differences that made him seem unsettling rather than familiar. Captain Park, Zirian said smoothly, I'm here to collect property that was stolen from the Hegemony Collective. Return the archive ship immediately, and there will be no conflict. Commander Zirian, Lisa replied calmly. The Archive Eternal is under human protection. You are not authorized to enter our space. I think you misunderstand the situation, Captain. The archives contain technology that rightfully belongs to the hegemony. We are the inheritors of precursor civilization, the only faction capable of using their knowledge responsibly. Elder Nethes' voice cut through the communication. The precursors left their knowledge to all galactic civilization, not to any single faction. The archives have been neutral for 10 million years. Neutrality, Zirian said with what might have been amusement, is a luxury that no longer exists. The galaxy is at war, Elder. Every resource, every piece of knowledge, every advantage must be claimed by someone. The only question is whether it will be claimed by those who seek order or by those who embrace chaos. Lisa cut off the communication and turned to her tactical officer. Commander Torres, how long until the Hegemony fleet reaches our border? 2 hours, 17 minutes at current speed. And how long until Admiral Webb's reinforcements arrive? 5 hours, 43 minutes minimum. Lisa nodded grimly. That left humanity with a half-hour window during which they would be badly outnumbered. But she had learned something important during her years serving in the human fleet. Sometimes being outnumbered was an advantage because it forced you to be creative. Lieutenant Zhang, open a channel to all human vessels in this sector. Include the refugee ships. Captain, Torres looked confused. You're not planning to involve civilian vessels in a military engagement? I'm planning to give them a choice, Lisa corrected. Open the channel. Within minutes, Lisa was looking at a display screen filled with the faces of ship captains representing dozens of different species. Some were human, commanding the patrol vessels and escort ships that had been protecting the refugee fleet. Others were aliens who had sought sanctuary in human space and now found themselves facing the prospect of war. "Captains," Lisa began, "you've all heard the situation. The hegemony is demanding that we turn over the Archive Eternal and its contents. As the senior human officer in this sector, I'm authorized to grant them safe passage through our space to avoid conflict." She paused to let that sink in before continuing. "However, I'm also authorized to fight if necessary to protect those who have sought sanctuary with us. The choice is yours. Any vessel that wishes to withdraw from this area will be allowed to do so without judgment. But anyone who stays will be considered part of the defense force." Captain Thane of the crystalline merchant vessel Crystal Song was the first to respond. "Captain Park, my people have faced hegemony integration before. We barely escaped with our lives. If they get precursor technology, nowhere in the galaxy will be safe." Captain Razak of the Vorthak freighter Iron will nod at agreement. "The hegemony destroyed my home colony. I owe them nothing but vengeance." One by one, the refugee ship captains voiced their support. Even vessels that had no weapons and no military training volunteered to stay and help however they could. Lisa felt a surge of pride mixed with apprehension. These beings had come to human space seeking safety, but now they were willing to fight alongside humanity against a force that vastly outnumbered them. "Elder Counselor Nethes," she said, turning to the ancient being's image on her screen, "I need to know exactly what the hegemony is after. What's in those archives that's worth risking galactic war?" The Elder's optical sensors dimmed as he accessed data systems that were older than most civilizations. The precursors developed what they called reality engines, devices capable of rewriting the fundamental laws of physics within defined areas of space. With enough reality engines, they could have restructured the galaxy itself. What happened to them? They chose to destroy themselves rather than become tyrants. But before they died, they hid blueprints for the reality engines throughout the galaxy. Over the millennia, we've managed to recover about 60% of those blueprints. Commander Torres spoke up from his station. "Captain, if the hegemony gets that technology—" "I know," Lisa said grimly. "They'll become gods, and everyone else will become their subjects." She turned back to the communication display. "Elder Counselor, are there any safeguards built into the precursor designs? Anything that would prevent misuse?" The precursors were very concerned about their technology falling into the wrong hands. Each set of blueprints includes what they called wisdom locks, complex ethical and philosophical challenges that must be solved before the technology can be activated. And you think the hegemony can't solve them? I think the hegemony would simply try to bypass them through brute force analysis, which would trigger the fail-safe mechanisms. Lisa felt a cold chill of understanding. What kind of fail-safes? The kind that would erase entire star systems to prevent misuse of the technology. The bridge fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. The hegemony wasn't just seeking ultimate power. They were pursuing it in a way that could trigger galactic-scale destruction. "Captain," Lieutenant Zhang reported, "the hegemony fleet has accelerated. They'll reach our border in 90 minutes. Lisa made her decision. "All ships prepare for combat operations. Elder Counselor Nethes, I need you to transfer a copy of the precursor archives to our ships immediately." "Captain, that's impossible. The archives contain over 10 million years of accumulated knowledge. Even compressed, the data volume would exceed the storage capacity of your entire fleet. Then transfer the most important parts, specifically anything related to the reality engines and their safeguards." While the data transfer began, Lisa opened a private channel to Admiral Webb. "Sir, I need authorization to use the quantum manipulation system." Webb's expression was troubled. "Captain, using that technology against a force this large could have unpredictable consequences. We're still learning how it works. Admiral, if the hegemony gets precursor technology, unpredictable consequences will be the least of our problems. They'll be able to rewrite reality on a whim. Webb was quiet for several seconds before nodding. Authorization granted. But Lisa, if this goes wrong, we could be looking at the end of human civilization. If we don't try, we could be looking at the end of galactic civilization. Lisa cut the communication and turned to her crew. All stations, prepare for quantum manipulation deployment. Target acquisition parameters. Any ship that enters human space without authorization. Captain, Commander Torres said quietly. Are you sure about this? We're talking about potentially erasing 200 ships and everyone aboard them. Lisa looked at the tactical display showing the approaching hegemony fleet, then at the refugee ships filled with beings who had sought human protection, then at the massive archive vessel carrying the accumulated knowledge of millions of years of galactic civilization. Commander, sometimes there are no good choices. Sometimes you have to choose between bad and worse, and hope you can live with the consequences. She activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. In 60 minutes, we're going to face an enemy force that outnumbers us 10 to 1. They want to steal technology that could enslave the entire galaxy. We're going to stop them. She paused, thinking about the long journey that had brought humanity to this moment, from a small, primitive species mocked for their weakness to the guardians of galactic freedom. We didn't ask for this responsibility, she continued. We never wanted to be the ones who decided the fate of civilizations. But history has placed us in this position, and we will not fail. For Earth, for our allies, for every being in this galaxy who values freedom over security, we will stand firm. The countdown began. In 57 minutes, either the hegemony would be stopped, or the galaxy would enter a new age of tyranny that would make the current war look like a minor disagreement between neighbors. Lisa Parks stood on the bridge of her ship and prepared to find out which future awaited them all. The quantum manipulation system powered up with a sound like reality itself humming in anticipation. In the cargo holds, refugee families from dozens of species huddled together and hoped that the humans who had offered them sanctuary would prove strong enough to protect them. And in the depths of space, Elder Counselor Nethes watched the approaching hegemony fleet and wondered if he had just delivered the key to galactic domination into the hands of the one species that might actually be able to stop it from being misused. Time would tell. It always did. But as the hegemony ships crossed the invisible line that marked the boundary of human space, Lisa Parks smiled the same kind of smile that had become humanity's signature in galactic affairs. The smile of a species that had learned never to fight fair when the stakes were high enough. Fire, she said quietly. And for the second time in 6 months, ships began disappearing from reality as if they had never existed at all.